Yeah, and I think if you stop doing that, your cost of creative is going to be astronomical. So we need to retain that approach to...
You could do triple the amount of iterations, but 70% of them are getting grouped under the same entity ID, so it's absolutely worthless activity to be doing. It's also going to put more strain on your creative strategists because they're going to have to be more intentional with how they're briefing those iterations in. Going into next year, what is going to be one of the most important and big swing roles that we need to bring into the business? And I think that is the role of an AI videographer.
The amount we're using that in our process is like crazy. We've then had Sora, and then we've had VO 3.1. It's just moving so fast.
I'm working on like a really strong prompt for like uploading videos into Gemini to then give you very clear, actionable direction on how you can add creative diversity in, because it can hypothesize on what's working and not based on benchmarks and soft metrics. And that's something obviously GPT can't do.
It's a nice bridge to getting a bit deeper into some of the AI work we've been doing.
And I want to talk maybe through the best VO hook variation frameworks that we're seeing right now working. Got our first Club Neuro event happening on Saturday.
How many people are coming?
100. Sold out pretty quick as well.
How's the events business?
Oh, it's a fucking nightmare, to be honest. To be fair, I can't say much because Liv's been leading most of the event organisation. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's one of those things where you think you don't do it for the profit. It's there for community building purposes, which is really valuable, and it's lining up with a new product launch that we have as well. But I think there's definitely a lot more hidden costs involved than you think.
I just always remember Arjun from Free Souls telling us that it was a nightmare.
They smash it though, don't they?
They do. They've obviously like operationalized it, and they're so like best in class at that stuff. But it just always told us. But yeah, what's the structure?
Yeah, so we've got obviously it's for a neurodivergent brand, so ADHD and autistic people that will be attending, and we have one panel. We have one doctor that's coming in to do a talk, and then also we have like round tables with group. We'll split into groups and do some like question prompts and stuff where people can like meet and get to know each other. And then I think we're going to end on just announcing the new product that we're launching, which is exciting. So it'll be a good learning. It'll be good to see how it goes. But I think I'm so bullish on community and just IRL, and I think there's so many case studies for that. Free Soul, Pure Sport, especially if it's a brand that really should have a community attached to it, which isn't every brand either. But I think there's a lot out there that it makes sense for.
Yeah, I think I'm sure there'll be plenty of neurodivergent people watching. I feel like we over-index as entrepreneurs and people who operate businesses as neurodivergent, so they should check the brand out for sure.
Speaking of that film, I swear, incredible. Anyone listening, if you've not seen it, go. You will cry.
I think it's one of the best films I've seen in
years.
Yeah, like in terms of like the story, the acting, the control of emotions, the quality. I don't know. It was just like flawlessly executed.
Yeah, give a bit of context just of what it's about.
So it's about a guy in like rural Scotland who develops Tourette's around probably 14, but he's obviously the awareness around Tourette's syndrome.
It's like in the 80s, isn't it?
Yeah, and he gets just marginalised by everybody, his family, school, everybody in life, and then he meets this individual who kind of empowers him, I guess.
The first person to like accept him for who he is and understand his condition. Because it makes you think about something like Tourette's in times where there's no education around it. Like imagine just the trouble you would get into just swearing at people on the street, even down to, police and things like that just wouldn't accept it as a condition.
It's the best use of the best control of tone I've ever seen in a piece of cinema. So everyone should definitely go watch it.
Yeah, you didn't warn me and I was crying my eyes out.
Yeah. It's tough. It's a tough watch, but in the best way. It's so heartwarming at the same time. But yeah,
exactly.
Go watch it.
Cool.
Anyway, welcome back, everybody. We're on a roll of solos again. You might recognise these outfits from the last one we did.
We do wash and change.
But yeah, obviously last solo episode, we focused a lot on incrementality, tactical things that are working. Since then, Loukas has released his masterclass on creative similarity and how we're thinking about process and adapting that. Now, everyone, if you've not watched that, pause now, go on YouTube, subscribe first, then watch that. Because I think it'll give you some really good insights into how we're thinking about it operationally and output wise. But I think it's worth starting there still as a bit of a rehash at the start of this episode from a top level perspective.
Yeah. So maybe let's start with you just giving a quick rundown again of what creative diversity means now, and a breakdown into like that piece around entity IDs, creative IDs, and what those differences are.
Yeah. So it kind of felt like this narrative started a few weeks ago with the episode we did with Sam. Meta released some better guidance on creative similarity in the pursuit of better incremental reach and more spend and more growth, and why brands might be struggling with that. We got some data from a client that sort of side-by-sided some UGC that was two different creators, two different messages, but were being grouped as the same asset. And I guess that's the perfect example of content ID, entity ID, right? It's like the content IDs are different, but they're being grouped under an entity ID because the diversity in that content is not being recognized as significant enough by Andromeda or by Meta. Therefore, that's limiting your audience pool through that group of assets, and it's limiting your reach as a function of that. So it's like, right, with that as a starting point, how do we think about adapting what we've been doing previously to get the most out of the algorithm and the ecosystem we find ourselves in as brands and operators?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, essentially, if a creative, the goal is to be assigned a new entity ID, right? Because it will start fresh then in terms of audience and learnings and unlock incrementality. So true creative diversity is important compared to minor tweaks to ensure that we're unlocking net new audiences. So I think right now, us and I think a lot of others will be looking at iterations as the thing that is going to be impacted most by this change, because I think, we do a lot of iterations on a week. We essentially right now set up iterations with weekly sprints. So we are launching net new campaigns and into the ad account, net new creative cycles every 30 to 35 days. And then on top of that, we are doing weekly iterative sprints. We were doing some creative with those iterations that were more visual changes, but a lot of them naturally came down to messaging tweaks. Whereas now the way that we need to be approaching iterations is very different, because we can't be doing those small messaging tweaks in an iterative way, because they will be grouped under the same entity ID and therefore essentially piggybacking off learnings that are already within the ad account.
Yeah. And I don't want this to think, I think the easy thing to think is like, right, we shouldn't be making iterations of any concept. So we shouldn't be taking a podcast ad and doing like 6 to 8 hooks or 6 to 8 variations of that footage, which I actually think is completely false. Because I almost feel like you need to separate iterations of existing performers and iterations of new concepts, and those are two like distinctions that need to be made prior to like really diving deep into the process on a weekly basis. Because whenever you're testing that net new piece, I think higher volume of different hooks and messages gives that new visual messaging vehicle a higher chance of hitting and succeeding.
Exactly.
But it's then once we've found something that's working, what's the iterative feedback loop and process look like off the back of an asset that's winning?
100%. Same messaging tests are still working, obviously, for net new concept variations, because it's launching into the ad account and there's nothing already there with that. So using the same visuals for net news isn't a bad thing, because the goal there is to identify which messaging resonates most with the target persona and how to communicate that message most effectively.
Yeah, and I think if you stop doing that, your cost of creative is going to be astronomical. So we need to retain that approach to big swings, lots of iterations across that big swing concept in the pursuit of finding something that we can then run with. But on the iteration of something that's really driving performance already, whether that's static, it's a UGC, it's how do we inject more visual diversity across the process.
Exactly. And I think the impact that this is going to have, let's park like net news for a moment and just look at it through iterations, because that's what's going to be impacted most in terms of how we need to change our approach. It's going to add more operational load and resource to the process, because by doing more visual changes within those iterations, that's going to put more strain on post-production, more strain on design, those teams that are going to be making those changes. It's also going to put more strain on your creative strategists, because they're going to have to be more intentional with how they're briefing those iterations in.
I also think it puts more strain on your brand department, because you have to find a way to do creative diversity whilst remaining on brand, if that's something that's really true to your business in a performance lens. So it's like compounds all the way through the org in some ways.
It's so true. I think it's a really good point, actually. I think brands that are very obsessed on it almost completely contradicts the idea of brand consistency, doesn't it? So brands that are very obsessed with that consistency, Meta's update does not align to that, and you need to almost break out of or relook at how you are approaching brand versus performance.
100%. I think it's like trying to find ways to remain on, form a common identity through assets, but allow for more flexibility in message and presentation.
Yeah.
That could probably be a whole podcast in itself. So let's park that. But looking at directly at performance creative process, you mentioned creative strategists, you mentioned post-prod production. It's just more cost, right? It's just like it's going to cost more to output the same amount with higher visual diversity and higher diversity. And
the way we've been thinking through this is how can we drive as much, if not more impact, but at the same amount of resource input, which again, I think in some ways isn't possible, but I do think it is possible in others. And sorry, were you going to say?
No, I was going to say something's got to give somewhere.
Exactly. Something's got to give somewhere. And I think the best way to ensure that iterations are still driving as much impact as they were previously so what we're doing is obviously we're moving from a model where we were doing weekly iteration sprints every single week, to a model where we are doing bi-weekly iterations, and less of them, but more intentional, big visual changes. So let's say you've got 100, based on reverse engineering from your volume, your spend targets into the amount of volume you need to produce. We did a whole episode breaking down how we get to this point, but you'll have the amount of iterations that you want to do across a month. What we are now starting to do is reduce that by 30, 40, 50%, doing less but more intentional, and then weighting the other 30, 40, 50% towards more variations of net news. Because by doing so, we are still driving the volume through iterations, but they are bigger visual swings. And then we are giving ourselves more chance of success and being able to do more messaging tests of net new concepts when we're getting to that campaign batch.
Makes sense. And I think that word intention, I think, is super important. Because I think like the iteration cycle, if you're not careful, can just fall into that category of like busy work. Like just throwing things at a wall, just changing things for the sake of it. So it's like really being, it's more creative, I guess, and it's at the heart of it, right? To drive that.
Exactly. But I think because the way we need to be thinking through this lens is like you could do triple the amount of iterations, but 70% of them are getting grouped under the same entity ID. So it's absolutely worthless activity to be doing. So we need to be thinking at it, we need to be thinking through it in a different way to ensure that we're still driving that impact and, helping drive incremental reach, which is obviously so important.
Yeah. And we always use strategic volume internally. And I think it's that balance. It's like people will always be like quantity versus quality. And I don't think it's more like how do we continuously drive more volume without losing quality and impact off the back of that output. And this kind of refocuses minds a little bit more on that, I think. Again, it's common for us to see brands just making a shed load of creative and not being able to grow spend and see an incremental reach decline. Number one signal that's not quality, that measure of quality and quantity isn't at the forefront of your operation. It needs to be.
Exactly. And I think this is why essentially what this means in many ways, in the way that we can use AI as a tool to increase efficiency whilst also aligning with creative diversity is leaning into things like Sora to VO3, Nano Banana for designers and statics to be able to still drive that volume, but through bigger visual changes without adding huge amounts of time to the process. So this kind of took me on a tangent of thinking, okay, going into next year, what is going to be one of the most important and big swing roles that we need to bring into the business, at least from a delivery perspective. And I think that is the role of an AI videographer or visual prompt engineer is probably the better way to put it.
Yep.
And the way I think about this is like you need to be treating like AI production the same way that you would treat production, because a creative strategist or an editor, they would never go out and shoot the content themselves. You'd hand that off to a production team with a brief to shoot that content that would then come back for ticketing to then go into post-prod. And I think we need to be, especially now with the volume that we're going to need to be producing through AI video and image gen, and how much that's even advanced over the last 3 months since we first did that VO3 episode. It means that this role is going to be incredibly important and be viewed almost as its own vertical and its own production department, but through the lens of visual prompt engineering.
100%. Since that VO3 episodes we've had, I think Nano Banana was before that, right?
No, I think it was after. Yeah.
And the volume of assets through Nano Banana, like the amount we're using that in our process is like crazy. We've then had Sora, and then we've had VO 3.1. And it's just like, again, it's just moving so fast. But yeah, I really liked the way you kind of thought about that or introduced that sort of mental model for how do we bring in AI in like, it's almost like compartmentalized, but like, and without having to really drastically change our current operation. It's like bringing them in, figuring out our way of like what goes into that production team, what goes into internal production team. And then again, hypothesis would be like, you'd expect the volume of assets produced by the AI department to increase as a total percentage of asset volume over time to probably, I think we'll get to a point of like 80-20 AI, and most of the 20% will be the very human
dialogue focus.
Dialogue, long form, founder, customer, things that we've talked about on the previous episode. Authentic, I guess, is the common theme through all of those, whereas AI is able to handle a lot of the products, probably a lot of the UGC to some degree, a lot of things that maybe don't require that same level of authenticity.
100%. And I think the beauty of it is like, it's quite simple to slot this in because you've already built the process for production or UGC briefing. And it's very similar, but you just need to treat it as a different type of production in many ways. So just like we brief UGC creators to shoot content or production teams to shoot high production content, your strategists will start to brief AI videographers or visual prompt engineers to create AI video alongside real content production. So initially that will be hook variations as an example, product shots, and also B-roll elements, because now, we didn't have this in the UK. It took a while to come to us, but the ingredient to video feature on VO3 is incredible now. So you can upload an image of your product and easily put it into a scene. We had one of our brands, Nothing Fishy, we'll put the example on screen, which is the product just floating in a tank and the fish are all going up to it. And it looks super realistic. It looks really strong. So, we're thinking of it through the lens, not only of how this can drive more creative diversity, but also what elements can we use that's going to reduce efficiency and strain on, say, the production unit. Yeah.
And it's that combat to like, you see you kind of see this creative diversity requirement as a cost pressure, and then you see the rise of AI tools as the opposite.
Exactly.
Like it's a relief to that from a cost per asset perspective, and that should over time continue to take effect. But yeah, I think that's going to be a huge unlock, and then it's just a process problem, I guess. Like, how do we optimize the inputs to that team and make it as efficient as possible?
Yeah, exactly.
Did you watch? Well, I know you watched because I sent you it. The Andrej Karpathy. I can't say his name. The guy who used to be, he used to work for Tesla self-driving AI. I also believe he had a founding team researcher role at OpenAI, where he made quite a bearish case for the current state of the AI and almost pointed to a bit of a bubble in a way that you would look at the .com bubble of sort of early 2000s.
Yeah, really interesting. I mean, what were your thoughts? Because it's a unique perspective, but one that I've not seen, especially for people that are deep in the AI industry.
My first thought was that's the first podcast that's impossible to watch on 2x speed. Like they talk so fast. It's a really, it's Dar, I think it's Dharmesh, the guy that the podcast he's on, I think.
We'll put the link below.
Yeah, it was a really like, it's always good to have a counter argument to what is just such a bullish environment. I think I also saw a really interesting stat the other day that GDP growth in 2025 has been 0.1% when you strip out investment in data centers. So if you remove the investment in data centers, which when you look at the flow of money there is quite it's like a flow chart of just companies investing in each other in different ways, like Microsoft, Nvidia, OpenAI, etc., which I think paints a bit of a bearish picture maybe for the 2026 economy when you strip that out and like maybe how the consumer versus tech is looking.
Yeah, especially when you see like China now starting to actually build these centers underwater in the ocean.
Yeah, China's that's another point. I saw Brian Chesky from Airbnb talking about how they're basically only using Alibaba. Alibaba have got loads of models, which I wasn't aware of. But they're faster, cheaper, and the quality is just apparently very similar. But obviously it's just a Chinese company, and he's using that most of their internal AI processes run off Alibaba models, which I need to look into, but segue. But yeah, it was interesting to get like felt a sense of almost relief that maybe we're not all doomed within like 3 years with AGI coming that fast. But fascinating to hear his like bearish case on the, and I'm not going to go into detail on what he said because I'll butcher. Everybody should just go watch the video. Like a bearish case on the sort of ability of LLMs and like our understanding of like building true intelligence and how like a lot of that requires reinforced learning, and the way that we're currently building these LLMs isn't creating that environment that creates a system of reinforced learning over time based on incentives and outcomes from tasks that are completed.
Interesting.
Hoping I haven't butchered that.
No, I think you said that. You said that better than I ever could. That's for sure.
But yeah, it was just interesting to get a bearish case on that whole environment from someone with such technical understanding.
Yeah, it's not. It's the first time I've seen the other case demonstrated, especially after coming off the back of like watching that podcast with the AI Godfather or whatever he's called, which was like very depressing watch. Have you seen, by the way, had played with ChatGPT's new browser coming off of Google?
Yeah, I think that's a bit of an overrated drop.
Do you think?
Like, I think it's interesting. Like, it's obviously built on Chromium, which is Chrome's base. Like, I think it's open. It's what it built Chrome on top of. So it's like, I don't want to say, it's not Chrome wrapper that's doing it in injustice, but it's an interesting release. But like, it just feels like they're just churning out so much stuff.
Yeah,
and its
product roadmap is wild.
And it's like, I also think the agent builder that they brought out in that big product release, like, I don't think the agent builder is great either.
Yeah, and
that doesn't mean that it's not going to become amazing, but yeah, it was just, I haven't found it that, like, it's not, I don't use it. I've downloaded it and played with it, but I haven't found it that like appealing to interact with on a daily basis.
Yeah. If there's one person you should back though, it's Sam.
Yeah, he's,
but like, cause you look at the first Sora as an example, pretty poor product. No one ever spoke about it after it was released. Sora 2, on the other hand, has created waves in the industry. And I think you see that a lot with their V1s and, you know, getting it into the ecosystem to start gaining context and learnings. And I think it personally, it's going to change the whole way that we operate within browsers. Like the fact that you're just so easily accessible to agent features there and then, like going to a website and saying, I need to book a flight for this, find me the cheapest cost, and it will just take over the screen and do it. The easy access to the LLM chatbot on the side to then speak directly with what you're seeing on screen. I think there are so many, I can just see how the way it's going to change the way we're using browsers.
I think it'll get better and better over time, 100%. I think that'll be not a normal... That'll be the way we interact with the internet. They also acquired Sky, which is a company that allows them to, does the same as they've managed to accomplish there for the browser, but with the whole Mac OS system, so they can take control of your whole computer. So they acquired a business that allows them to do that.
A bit like TeamViewer.
Yeah, kind of, but like AI integrated. I'm still very bullish on Google as an AI. Like, I use Gemini more than anything, I think, as a tool. Like, I use their suite of AI tools. I think more than I do OpenAI. I think it's got it's got a really good context window, especially the more recent updates. Obviously, the video aspects and some of those elements that Nano Banana, VO3.
Also, like we're working through a lot of context documentation at the moment, how we can build that into like better prompt engineering. And I'm working on like a really strong prompt for like uploading videos into Gemini to then give you very clear, actionable direction on like how you can add creative diversity in, because it can read the video, it can understand it. If you give it the right context, it can hypothesize on what's working and not based on benchmarks and soft metrics. And that's something obviously GPT can't do.
Yeah, I just think the most recent Gemini as well, and I think there's one releasing very soon, maybe in October. It's got a really long extended context window, which I think is really, really valuable.
That's the most valuable part.
100%. That's the biggest limitation. I also think Claude are putting out a lot of interesting stuff right now.
Yeah, Claude as well. That's the problem. They're all very good for different things.
Yeah,
like Claude for script writing, without a doubt.
Anything written. They brought out skills, obviously, where you can teach it like specific. I've not actually used it, and I don't want to again butcher the explanation. But they brought out this almost the ability to like train it on specific skills, and then leverage that as you would train probably an individual in a company.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess it's a nice. It was a bit of a segue, but it's a nice like bridge to getting a bit deeper into some of the AI work we've been doing internally, or you've been doing specifically with the help of Sam, Tom, and Harry, who's a consultant we're utilizing. So yeah, it'd be good to dive through that. I think one thing that we're working on just top level is like data warehousing, which I think we've made some really large strides over the last sort of 3 months specifically. Obviously, we've got like add data, context, warehousing, combined shared learnings. But we've started to really think about ingesting call logs, like really just warehousing all of the data that we're creating as a business that's then promptable and something we can interact with. But from a creative perspective, like how have you been sort of driving this forward the last few months?
Yeah, I think the thing that's become more and more apparent is just the need for incredibly strong context.
Yeah.
To ensure that, you know, we're putting the right input in to get the best possible output. I think the way you need to think about that is like an LLM is never going to have the understanding or the knowledge that you're going to have around a specific area. So, for example, that might be in a really micro sense, top of funnel script writing. We've got that knowledge and we've got that context to be able to give it more directional inputs so you can get the best possible output. Yeah. Because if otherwise it is working off existing knowledge that it might have through what it can find online, which isn't going to be anywhere near the standard of knowledge that we will have that is specific to our business. So one thing that we've built is a really extensive context library for every part of the creative strategy process, whether that's hooks. So how to create incredible hooks with like examples. This is pairing. So there's 2 documents for each. So one is how to create incredible hooks with all of the knowledge we have of what makes great hooks, all of the best performing hook frameworks, hook layers. So from sound, visuals, text on screen, etc., etc. And then the second document is best performing hooks from the last 90 days. And by pairing those 2 documents together and uploading that with your prompt, it is going to give a very directional output that uses the context that you've uploaded to make it much stronger, essentially. And we're doing that for every part of the process. So whether that is the research phase, whether that is iterating. So we've got a master iterator prompt. So you're training it to become an incredible at iterating, top of funnel scripting, and then having context documents that break down the frameworks of all of your top spenders for statics, UGC, high prod from the last 90 days, because by giving it that, as I say, that directional context, it can do an incredible job at just really improving the output. So if I was anyone that's listening to this right now, I would start thinking through that lens. How can we create context documents that almost creates a framework for the LLM to work in to give you the best possible output? So each stage of your business, that is, and as well as that, lean into the data. So you know what your top spenders are, you know what's working in your account, download those, create frameworks off the back of them, put them into documents, because just by uploading all of that context into GPT or whatever LLM you're using, it's going to give a much better output, and it has much better context of what's currently working right now, and it can do a great job at consolidating all of that.
Yeah, you mentioned different stages of the business. I think you can do. We obviously speak a lot about this in a creative context, but you can do it in any area: sales, marketing. And I do think it's just like it's quite, boring's the wrong word, but it is like documenting things isn't the most exciting thing to do in the world, but it's like it really is the key. It's like doing the boring work, spending the time, the getting into like a flow of just building out those context documents, building out what best practice looks like, taking that out of your head and putting it on paper, which I think people probably don't spend enough time on.
Exactly. Because the way you got to think of it as well, it's like, imagine closing your eyes and just shooting a gun to try and find the target. You're going to miss 9 times out of 10. Whereas if the mask comes off and you've got a very clear target, you're going to shoot and you're going to hit that target. That's how I look at context documents and uploading them with your prompts, because you might have a trained GPT bot that you think you've uploaded 10, 20, 30 documents about the brand, all of the reviews. There's too much there to be able to give directional context to the thing that you're asking it. You've only got a certain context window. It's like a script. If you have a 1-page script, you can only write so many words on that. Once it gets past that, it's irrelevant. It's not going to be able to read that information, which is why we need to become like more directional with the context. Another example, just like outside of creative and D2C, is this podcast. So I was talking to you and Matt the other day, and I've got a context document about what a great communicator is and how to communicate well on a podcast. And I just pulled that from actually watching, I need to find his name, but he's a communication expert. He went on Diary of a CEO. I literally pulled the transcript. It's like a 2.5-hour episode. So many actionable takeaways from that, which is all about how to present well, how to communicate, how to avoid filler words, all of these different things. I downloaded the transcript, which again, if you just go to any YouTube video, there's a little button that says show transcript, copy and paste it, put it into ChatGPT and tell it to create a context document out of that. You can maybe pull context from a few different videos, and then it will create a great context document for you about how to become an incredible communicator. I then use that context doc, I upload the transcript from one of our episodes and ask it to critique me and give me feedback based on that. And because it's got the context to know what a great communicator is, it can do that.
God, I'm not doing that.
I don't do it for every episode, by the way, but it's something it's more because I've noticed I use filler words occasionally. So I'm
trying to get it out of the system.
And I also I have a habit of saying the same phrases over and over again. So it gives me direction on how to say this in a slightly different way next time.
It's a good idea. I think like, so that's an example of like using AI as like a personal development help, which I think it really is it's really good at that. In a world where maybe as a founder of a business, you don't get as much feedback as other people. I think it's like, how do you look and build a process to give you feedback? We're building right now a similar thing for our sales team. So as every sales call, it gets, we've uploaded context on our business, what we're selling, ICP, loads of call recordings. Every sales call whips into ChatGPT or an AI tool, can't remember which one, and then goes back in a Slack channel to our sales guy with a real concise breakdown of what he could have done better. And it's just like shortening that feedback loop. We're training that on loads of like high ticket sales leaders and experts, and that's an example of building a feedback loop. Yeah. And I think it's really valuable to think through that. Managers as well, like if you've got new managers in your business and they're holding or conducting reviews for the team, you know, being able to do the same thing you just mentioned, but for a manager, and having context and being able to score based on, you know, how could they have improved in giving this feedback? Could they have what did they score on like empowerment or empathy and directness, candor, all of these different areas that you know means that you can get that instant feedback loop and become better at what you do essentially without having the strain of having someone else to do that. Yeah. That context example is third party. I also think we've mentioned this on a previous podcast, but I can't recommend that Whisper Flow enough. Oh, that's unreal. Alex Cooper put us on that. Yeah, he did. Us, and I think it's my most used thing on my computer. It's like I use it every day, multiple times a day. It's just voice dictation which allows you to just upload personal context at length without having to type it out. Yeah, or even like a Slack message. Yeah. Anything. It's so good, so good. Switching topics a little bit towards video gen, because I know we've got some bits to chat through here. We've seen, as we've touched on, since we did the VO3 deep dive, just a massive shift in this market again. Dread to think what Q1's going to look like, but it'd be good to just touch on like how we're utilizing video gen now versus maybe three months ago. Yeah, so obviously Sora 2 has come out, which is better than VO3, I think, right now in certain ways, especially for like low prod style video that feels feels very, very authentic and real. If anyone watching has a way for us to access these models ahead of the UK release that doesn't involve building some lengthy API tool, like I'd love it. Like, please let us know in the comments. Message me. We'll pay you. Like, because we still don't have access to Sora 2 in the UK, and we're just having to use like APIs, which it just doesn't work the same. No, but anyway. But yeah. So obviously, we haven't been able to really stretch our legs there. We've obviously been able to do a few things like those secret filming style videos where it's like faking a CCTV camera or a Ring doorbell and stuff like that. But I think before we go into actually let's start here, and then I want to go into what next year probably looks like and some predictions there. But I think in terms of through the lens of VO3, as I mentioned earlier, we are now using that more and more for like product B-roll because of the ingredients, what's it called? I forgot the name of it now. Ingredient to video feature. We are able to now very easily produce pretty strong B-roll that would have taken us, an hour, 2 hours to have set up and shot in a studio, which is, reducing the operational load on the production team. The problem is right now, obviously, as I said, we're looking to bring in AI videographers and visual prompt engineers. It puts more strain on post-production.
So that's obviously something that we're working through. The second thing that I am just starting to see work better and better now is VO hook variations. And this very much aligns with what obviously we're doing with Andromeda. And I want to talk maybe through the best VO hook variation frameworks that we're seeing right now working. Number one just has to be the visual metaphor. So taking an abstract idea and transforming it into a literal and exaggerated image almost. So, example, gut, if we're talking about gut health as a problem, that could be a visual of showing a light in the gut going from red to green, or showing a stomach blowing up like a balloon. Anxiety, so the hook might be, does your anxiety ever feel like your head's blowing up like a balloon and that someone's head just slowly expanding? Skin, we had a great example that's a top spender for a brand. The original creative didn't work, and the second one was talking about was the same hook, but the visual changed. And the hook was, after 40, your collagen depletion almost triples, or something like that. And previously it was just the shot of the founder VSL style, and then we just overlaid it with a VO shot of a woman's skin from going really young, a close-up of her face, going from really young skin to the wrinkles suddenly appearing. And now that, I think, got like 40% TSR and working really well. So those visual metaphors are working great.
I guess that's, it's like, it makes sense because it's very like, it probably captures attention. It's a little bit more obscure than maybe something you're able to produce naturally with footage. I've also seen a few examples of where brands are like able to like double down on the feeling you're trying to convey in more ways in an asset. So maybe you'd be trying to talk about brain fog or energy. This is me off the top of my head. And it would have like someone just looking sad, looking like under the weather, but then they've like overlaid loads of clouds. Like the environment they're in looks like a bit grim, like low energy. Like they've multiplied it in ways beyond just the person. Exactly.
That was the next one. So great work. Exaggerated cause and effect.
I actually didn't read that on the notes. So.
So yeah, exactly that. So taking almost the problem and exaggerating it through the visual, pushing it to the extreme. And that isn't just necessarily problem related. It could be based on desired outcome as well. So for example, if it's a product or beverage that is supposed to give you like all day energy, taking a sip and suddenly you're at the top of a mountain, things like that. But actually, out of all of this, the stuff that is just working best for VO right now is the stuff that isn't as crazy, obvious. And what's funny about this is actually my opinion on this has kind of changed, where previously it was like, let's lean into the obviously AI, to actually I'm seeing the stuff that isn't as obviously AI performing better in some cases. And I think an example of that is, we did a creative where it was talking about, does your stomach ever feel like a balloon about to explode? But it was actually, we made through VO3 an animation of and it was like a very basic looking animation that didn't look like it was created through AI, of someone's stomach, piercing someone's stomach and a load of sand falling out of the stomach. And I think, again, that's something to also be considering here alongside these clearly AI driven creatives. How can we create through VO3 in a way that doesn't necessarily make it look like AI? And it's finding that balance of the two, because I think we're living in a world right now where, at least through TikTok, if I'm looking at the feed, every single comment on any type of video, people just are paranoid about whether this AI. I feel like this is AI, and people are always questioning that. So yeah.
So I think that's going to be. So I've already seen cases of pretty strong backlash into campaigns. I can't, and I'm telling a story without the exact story in my head, which I've done before on the podcast. It's never great, but there was a example of a heritage British brand recently that did a brand campaign on Instagram, and they clearly used AI for it, and the comments were just destroying them. I've also started to see someone sort of posted on Twitter, like films at the end of credits have started to put like generative AI was not used in the creation of this media, which I think is like a sign of like interesting sign of where we're maybe going, and the sort of narrative that's going to be brought into more of those like traditional creative formats, where people are probably going to be a little bit more, definitely more like negative about AI taking over like creative industries, film, television. But yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that sentiment plays out across the whole, because we operate in a bit of a vacuum through Meta, through TikTok, through social channels, which are always going to be the first and are probably going to have the least negative reception. But it'd be really interesting to see how that plays out in these traditional mediums.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I feel like speaking to friends and people that aren't in our industry at all, it feels like it's very villainized in many ways in other industries. Obviously, not so much in the world, the land of cowboys. Land of chad scalers.
We'll do it. If it works, we'll do it. That's the narrative. I guess that's a good segue into like where we think this is maybe going into 2026. We've touched on that production department piece, which I think we're quite far along AI adoption as an agency, and we're doing a lot of work operationally, like onboarding, sales, which I mentioned, just giving our team the tools to do better work through leveraging AI with better context inputted into it, and bringing in the production team. But where do you think we're going to head into like early 2026 and beyond?
Yeah, I think in starting with something that's really boring in many ways, but I think the people that are going to win with this new creative diversity are the ones that actually build systems of organizing assets. And that also comes through AI. So I think going into next year, I really see us, for example, building agents that when you say shoot some net new content or a net new piece of B-roll, or even a static with someone holding a product, or, you know, a product flat lay, through the use of an agent, taking that and creating 10, 20, 30 more versions of that creates the visual differentiation within the creative. Because I think what is if we're going to want to continue to iterate at scale through visual diversity, we're not only going to have to find ways to multiply how we diversify the visuals, but also how that creative is organized into folders, into things like Frame 4.0, where it's easily accessible. Because otherwise, as volume continues to increase, those that have proper organization in place and, through how we are almost modulating the assets that we upload, whether that's hooks, whether that's B-roll, whether that's product flat lays, to be able to easily find these at scale, I think are the ones that are going to win.
Yeah, I dread to think in some brands how much of like a graveyard of asset production that some brands have, like where they're not doing that well and things just sit there, they get used once and never get touched again.
Yeah.
I also think it's interesting to think about, if you do that well, that becomes a great context library in itself when you start to be able to upload things to sort of VO3.
I think that's why data warehousing is so important, because the data from the ad account becomes the context that then if you have trained the model on the right theory of, okay, this is what it's got, the data of what works in the account, it's got data of how to iterate based on certain metrics, it can then get to a point where it can actually prompt really well and produce really good assets through,
or at least
image
pull
or video
from
gen.
the asset library things that could be used in the final output. Yeah,
and that's what I'd look into Frame 4.0 if people aren't using that, because Frame 4.0 is great for that. You can search. It does AI labeling based on reading the visuals of the assets, and it also transcribes every asset, so you can find things just by typing in a word or something. So it's definitely one to look at. I would say another thing just on the creator side is, and I think Jake Paul it was really interesting what he obviously there was loads of the Sora 2 content of Jake Paul just like applying makeup and like funny, hilarious actually. And I think he's just so smart. I think he obviously, there was so many of these videos coming out about him that it was almost like a little bit fishy. And I knew he was involved in some way, but he was the first person to like license his face on the platform. He's also an investor of OpenAI, and he then came out about that. And obviously everyone's using his face now to create this funny content because he was the first person to, I don't know if he used, I think it's called something else on Sora 2, but essentially licensing a face to be used and reproduced on the platform. I think we're going to be in a world where next year where we're seeing more and more UGC creators doing that through a platform like Sora. So we pay to be able to use the license of their face to create assets or ads with that.
I think that makes sense. The interesting counter to that is like, why not just generate them from scratch when it's someone who doesn't have the sort of publicity to his level?
Because it's creative diversity and volume, right? So if you look at like all of the stuff that Jake Paul, that people have made Jake Paul do, they've made him like go into McDonald's and in a dress screaming at someone at the counter, like applying makeup and doing like a get ready with me. You could take that person's face and at a lower cost be able to produce hundreds, if not thousands of assets.
Yeah, it makes sense. I get it in his context. It's like from a brand context, it's like, do you buy someone's license or do you just generate someone who doesn't exist? I don't think it's possible to do that yet in that quality.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think
when
it's only good to latch on. It's really good at latching on someone's likeness after about a 5-second video upload from what I've seen, which is nuts. But yeah, it's interesting. I also think we may be interesting to think about how experts then maybe play out in that whole role. Like, will we see like credible experts then license their likeness to brands that they're involved with? It make that whole workflow easier.
Yeah, it's a dangerous game, isn't it? Like I'd be interested. I mean, where do you think it's going to go in terms of like legislation in the next 12 months?
There has to be some. Well, it's illegal to do fully generated AI ads in certain categories already, I believe, in America. I've definitely seen some like publications and read through some lengthy Twitter threads on that. But I don't know what it'll look like, but I feel like there'll be a significant shift in advertising legislation.
Yeah, there has to be. I mean, I feel like if we in the UK will get hit by that more than say,
EU, UK, States, usually that's the order, right?
Yeah. Because we've spoken about this before, but it's like the race against China with AI, isn't it? And it's like if you introduce legislation in, say, the US, it's going to slow down that and reduce their chances of winning that race.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Anything on your side in terms of predictions
for next year?
Yeah.
In general?
Just in terms of AI.
God, I'm probably the episode coming out after this or a couple of episodes after this of doing a lengthy episode around AI SEO and the rise of like commerce through AI. I think that's something that's going to be a massive opportunity into 2026. I think it's just starting to get going as a channel for marketing and getting and distribution of products. Which just adds more complexity to brands. It's like more places to meet customers, which is great, but there's more things to think about. So I think we're going to see that continue and accelerate pretty aggressively. I think we're going to see more of these. I just feel like most things on the internet are advertising channels, whether it starts as an advertising channel or it gets to being an advertising channel at some point. Like you look at Amazon, like is an ads channel as well as a commerce channel, like Netflix, like most of the places you go on online serve ads in some format. OpenAI will start to do that soon, I imagine. They'll start to do it in every app.
It's just crazy, like what that would do to their market cap.
Yeah, it's like it's bonkers.
If you think about like the value of that company already without advertising,
I would go and look if for those watching who haven't have a look on Twitter or LinkedIn and look for the retention curve on ChatGPT usage. It is absolutely bonkers. So like a cohort graph on how churn rate, it's crazy. It's like basically doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So hard to predict. So hard to predict, but just got to keep.
Yeah, I think my philosophy has what I've learned this year. It's like I didn't think good AI video gen would be here right now. I thought it would likely hit next year, whereas it's come way quicker than we thought it would. And I think that's got to be the philosophy moving forward. If you think something's coming,
shorten your time horizons
by 50%, and it's likely gonna hit probably sooner to that point.
As we like to ask internally, how do we make it happen in half the time? Hypothetically, how do we make this happen in 30 days, not 60?
Yeah. Side note, that's a great question to ask.
Great mental model.
Anyone on your team.
challenge your expectations of timelines. Even if you look at that Alex Cooper episode, I think we were discussing percentage of assets from AI that time next year, and I think we definitely made some lower bound assumptions then, where I'd be shocked if it isn't like 8%, but we'll see.
Yeah, agreed. But I think you still need to, it's still, I think the beauty of it is it reduces the barrier to entry, but it increases, the creativity in which you have to deliver that.
Yeah.
Because, it's a tool at the end of the day, and it's how you use that tool.
100%.
It's the wizard, not the wand.
On that note, should we wrap up?
Yeah, let's do it.
Perfect.
Probably got 90% drop off as soon as I said that line. So,
thank you all for watching, as always.
Yeah, another banger. If you enjoyed these solo eps, let us know in the comments. Appreciate if you could subscribe, and see you on the next episode.